Assalamu alaikum to the Muslim brothers and sisters. I have a subject that I want to talk about that it may ruffle a few feathers, but it's something that has to be addressed. It's been something that's been on my mind for quite some time, and it's a serious issue within or amongst Muslims, and I would be, hypocritical if I didn't address it. Many of my past videos, you've always heard me be very vocal about racism, and particularly racism and bigotry that comes from those in Christianity, which, as I had, if you know, familiar with my story, was one of the things that turned me off about Christianity, which was its, cooperative use in the promotion of racism, white supremacy, with the imagery of, the white Jesus, white God, white angels, etc. And of course how it was used, in the discrimination and mistreatment of black peoples on the earth and others as well. And so, the appeal, one of the appeals, wasn't the only, but one of the appeals of Islam was that it had clear and decisive teachings about and against racism. And so that was very appealing. And now, I've been Muslim for over 20 years now. And there is an issue amongst Muslims. And that is the issue of racism amongst Muslims, particularly those who are from the Middle East. And, because of the internet and the availability now of information that the availability of information, these things have been brought to the surface and are being exposed. And so it bothers me greatly, and it needs to be addressed for the very fact that Islam has clear teachings against it, which is the difference, on why you might ask, well, why are you still being a Muslim? Well, because it's clear that the teachings of Islam are against the subject matter that I'm going to speak about. Now, over the years, I used to hear, people attempting to try to discredit Islam or get particularly black people to shy away from Islam by telling us that, the Arabs, they call you a bead and they think you're a bead, and the bead means slave and whatever. This is what they call black people. So, in the earlier period, I would shrug it off as just that, this is just an attempt to try to get black people to be dissatisfied with Islam or whatever, So I shrugged it off, because I hadn't seen any proof of it myself. But as I said, now with the internet and the availability of videos and widespread information, it has come to my knowledge that these things are in fact true. These things are in fact true, that in a general sense, many of those in the Middle East and from Arab backgrounds do indeed refer to black people, whether you're a black Muslim or not, as Abid, which is shameful. Because, of course, this does not trace back to the teachings of the Quran, not to the teachings of the Prophet. And so, it's sad that, and as I said, Islam does indeed have very clear stated teachings against racism and bigotry. As everyone knows in the farewell sermon of the Prophet, peace be upon him, where he mentions, he deals with racism. He says that, there is no superiority of the Arab over the non-Arab and the non-Arab over the Arab. No superiority for the black over the white or the white over the black, etc. The only thing that makes one excel in the eyes of God is your piety, your righteousness, your righteous deeds, etc. in the eyes of God. And so we have these clear teachings, but unfortunately we see that there is this it's a common thing. It's not like it's the minority. It appears to be a common usage to refer to black people, where even your own Muslim brothers, as Abid, which is slave. Now, what that tells me psychologically, and I'm going to show proof that this is how it's understood, because I'm going to show you people who are from those regions, black, quote unquote black Arabs from the Arab countries, who tell you that that is indeed the understanding, and which I already figured out, which is that usage of that word in a common sense shows that that's how they look at us as black people. In other words, even though today slavery is pretty much over, but we are still looked upon as slaves, similar to here in America, where where you still have people talking that way, of course, and in the the racist Southerners would refer to black people as nigger on the regular basis, because that's what it was, just accepted that that's what you are. You're just a nigger, and you're worthless, you're nothing, and so I'm gonna just keep calling you a nigger. You see, and so it's the same thing with Abid. They see us as just that. You're still a slave, even though here we are in the 21st century. We're free people, but they still refer to us as Abid in the common sense, which is showing that this is nothing more than what they see us as a slave, and that's pretty shameful. That's pretty shameful. Now, as I said, this is against Islam, so I'm not sure. I don't know how the word continued to be used, and is continued to be used today, when these teachings about the Prophet should be pretty well known and pretty common for everyone to know about, and yet this is what we still have, where they just commonly refer to us as Abid. You see it on Twitter in just regular conversations, and it's not and it's not just secular Arabs too. You see, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you pictures, a clip, of tweets from sisters in full hijab. Now, of course, that's not a proof of righteousness, but at least it's a sign that this person has somewhat of a religious practice about them, that obviously they're wearing hijab. So you'll see sisters in hijab using a bead like it's nothing. These are bead, I saw these are bead doing this. These are bead, were looking at me doing that. Muslim men, Arab men, same thing. These are bead, these are bead, get on my nerves. I saw these are bead at McDonald's. I saw these are bead on the train. These are beads were talking loud. And I'm like, wow. That's so disrespectful. But again, this shows you the mentality is that that's how they look at us. You see? And so I want to expose this, because we can't allow this to go on. Like I said, I'd be hypocritical if I would rail against white racism, but I sit and keep my mouth shut about racism amongst Arabs, who are supposed to be my fellow Muslim brothers and sisters. And it goes beyond just the use of the word, because I'm going to show that there's also mistreatment of black people in these countries where Islam is supposed to be the dominant way. And yet, unfortunately, it appears that they have not learned the lessons that the Quran teaches, that the Prophet taught. And like in every place, unfortunately, black people are on the bottom being marginalized, not because there's something wrong with black people, but because of this, the color of the skin, nothing more than that. Because obviously we have the abilities to achieve, and we have done so through our history. But unfortunately, there are some societies that just because of this color, there's a hatred, there's a dislike, and there's a willingness to try to keep us down. Through institutions, not just, people hate you, they don't like you, but no, through institutions. And you will see that this is happening in many of these countries where institutionally the black people are kept down. And of course, they say, when officials are spoken to, of course, they deny it and say everybody's equal and everybody's fair. It's the same thing like in South America. You go to South America, same thing. They claim, oh no, we're all the same, we're equal, we're this, we're in the same country, la la la. But then when you look at the institutions, you see no representation of the blacks in those places. They are, and again, the blacks are on the bottom. Not by choice, but by design. So it's the same thing over in the Middle East, same thing, everybody's fair, we equal, a lot, same thing. But when you look at the facts on the ground, you see that the black people are at the bottom, and it's institutionalized. Meaning it is the institution of the government structure, the societal structure, by design, keeps them in that position, tries to prevent them from achieving. And of course, they're trying to achieve. Like I said, I'm going to show you that. Because they have activists in Iraq and in other places, trying to make a change to achieve more. So it's not like these people are accepting this. But the fact that it's there, it needs to be addressed and it needs to stop. As I said, it is clear in Islam that, Islam does not teach Arabs. There's no such teachings that promote the superiority of Arabs. The Prophet was very clear. Unfortunately, though, if you actually do some research, you will find that unfortunately there were some classical scholars that did indeed try to attempt to promote the idea of Arab superiority. For example, here we see in the writings of Ibn Taymiyyah, it is said that he said the belief of the Ahl Sunnati wa Jama'ah is that the essence of the Arabs is better than that of Ajam, meaning the non-Arabs, whether the Ajam are Hebrew, Assyrians, Romans, Persians, or others. Of course, this is his own saying, and of course it contradicts what we have from the Prophet, but you see that this idea here is promoted. Now, some try to say, to explain this away, by saying, well, it's just talking about just because, you know, the Prophet was from the Arabs or whatever. But nonetheless, that excuse doesn't work for me. The Prophet clearly said that there's no superiority of that, and he did not give any exceptions. So this claim is just some bogus claim that obviously crept into the deen, unfortunately. And to further prove that it wasn't just, you know, him saying that, well, just because the Prophet is from the Arabs, is his statement right here. The virtue of Arabs, Quraysh and then Bani Hashim, is not just because the Prophet was from them. Even though this is a part of virtue, Arabs are in themselves better. So, unfortunately, like I said, as you see some classical scholars, and of course there are many Muslims who, just because it's a classical scholar, they take it as if it's almost the word of Allah or the word of the Prophet. But thank Allah that the Prophet says what is clearly against this. His words are clear in the last sermon, that again, there is no superiority for an Arab over a non-Arab, or the non-Arab over the Arab, or the black over the white, or the white over the black. And he gives no exceptions other than you're only better in the sight of Allah by your virtue, your piety. He doesn't say, well, the Arabs are better because I'm from them, or the Arabs are better because the Quran is in Arabic, or of these silly excuses that I've seen in attempts to people to justify these blatant forms of racism or an attempt to promote Arab superiority. The Prophet was clear, thank Allah for that there is no superiority, and he gave no exceptions other than people being better in the eyes of Allah based upon your piety, your righteous deeds, your actions, your character, etc., but never claiming that the Arabs are better in and of themselves, as this statement is made here. But again, this is what crept in, and we must deal with it. We cannot continue to brush this aside or brush it under the rug. It is indeed wrong. There were some that did indeed feel that, you know, Arabs shouldn't marry non-Arabs and things of that nature. And of course, these are far from the teachings of Islam, but yet we find this there. And so I'm bringing this because it needs to be addressed. We as the Muslim community worldwide, locally, nationally, need to deal with this and address this, because this will only lead to the further disunity of the Ummah of the Muslim nation. And so I'm bringing it to the forefront because it has to be exposed. It needs to be addressed, and we need to deal with it and fix it quickly. Okay, this cannot be accepted. We cannot just brush this under the rug and sit quietly while this goes on. So as I said, I'm going to take you through a little trip and take you to a few places, from Morocco to Iraq to Yemen. In other words, from all the way from the west coast of Africa all the way to the Arabian Peninsula. We will see that there is unfortunately a mistreatment of black people by Arabs who are supposed to be Muslim, who should know better. Because the teachings, again I repeat, the teachings of Islam are clear on this issue. And yet we see that there's ignorance abounding, and people are still acting out in this way. So let's follow along while I show you some of these issues.
Behind these gates at Rabat Central Bus Station, a young migrant from Senegal was knifed to death on August 12. He lived in this poor neighborhood of the Moroccan capital. Here, like in many other Moroccan cities and towns, migrants hailing from sub-Saharan Africa face daily acts of violence.
I went out to buy something, so I saw three guys, three Moroccans, and they attacked me with a knife. They took my phone and some of my money.
Kingsley told us he felt lucky as he only suffered superficial knife wounds, but he said racism was rampant.
We are facing a lot of racism here in Morocco. They don't like we blacks. We don't have right for many things. You can't sit, you can't talk to a woman. You cannot talk to a woman. it's not allowed here in Morocco. They don't give out job to black people. Even if you have the qualification, even you are capable of doing the job, they can't give the job to you because you're a black man here in Morocco.
His outrage over constant discrimination is shared by many other migrants.
They call us monkeys when we were all equals. We have the same red blood flowing in our veins. Even women spit when we walk by.
For local anti-racist groups, Moroccans tend to openly abuse black Africans due to the government's discriminatory treatment of migrants.
This is what I was mentioning here, that it's more than just, people acting racist, and so it's just like, a thing with people themselves. But no, it's actually deeper, that as we are seeing here, it's also in the institutions of the government.
You're in a country where the government very much targets black, sub-Saharan, illegal immigrants, down to the very words used to describe them. Immigrants are always linked to prostitution, AIDS, drugs and human trafficking. I think this plays an important role. Institutional racism influences the local population.
Faced with increasing racist attacks, some migrants, illegal or not, are now thinking of returning home, even at the cost of feeling ashamed over their failure to make it abroad.
They are still being called by their ancestral names, slaves. Black Iraqis who have lived for hundreds of years in the southern province of Basra say they are discriminated against.
There are traditions in the society. People might say it doesn't exist, but we feel it. For example, when two people fight in the street, one is black and the other one is white. They say X had a fight with a slave. It really hurts.
Sha'ban is a member of the movement for free Iraqis. He advocates for more rights for black Iraqis, like parliament representation and more jobs. He says there's a conspiracy against them.
Why is there no black merchant or a senior black official in the state? We concluded that there's no place for the blacks in the Iraqi society or in the state.
They live in poverty and on the margins of society, working in low-paid professions. Local officials say there's no discrimination against anyone and that the door is open for any group to participate and take their role in the society.
We don't want to differentiate one sect or color over another. This is part of ethnic, racial and sectarian division. We want Basra to stay away from it. But if there's a big group like the blacks in Basra, they should and can compete with the other sect or groups in the elections.
But some black Iraqis say they are not treated the same way as other minorities.
We want to be like the Christians, the Mandaeans and other white minorities who have fixed representation in parliament. We, the black people in Iraq, have rights.
An argument that some tribal sheikhs disagree with.
Now politics is free for everyone and free choice, and whoever wants to be a member of parliament or heads the cabinet should present himself to the Iraqi people, and they will elect whoever they want.
On the streets of Basra, residents say discrimination doesn't exist.
The whites are 90% and the blacks are 10% in Iraq and Basra. That's why you find few blacks in high posts and ranks, because the whites are more. But we're all brothers and my best friends are black.
We live together and there's love. They are also socially interrelated. There's no difference.
Others say there are some taboos.
There's no exclusion of the blacks. There are some traditions in the society that they too don't intermarry, but otherwise they coexist together peacefully.
And while the varying opinions continues to divide this war-ravaged country, the daily struggle for survival remains a challenge for over 1 million black Iraq.
So as I said, it's the same thing that you see if you check South America and its racism. That same thing. There is this claim that everybody's fair and everybody's equal and we're all together in this, but the physical reality on the ground says the exact opposite. So those people may be sincere, but the reality doesn't prove that.
Most blacks here are descendants of Africans brought as slaves to Iraq's south more than 1,000 years ago to drain marshes and build the city of Basra. And many Iraqis still call blacks abid, an Arabic word that means slave. Many white Iraqis claim that term isn't meant to offend. They don't think black Iraqis are oppressed.
No, they have the same rights we have. Black people and white people are the same. Same religion, same jobs.
In Basra, however, many black Iraqis have menial jobs. There are no black members of the Iraqi parliament. The movement of Free Iraqis, founded 2 years ago, is busy putting up posters on Basra's streets, preparing for Iraq's January 31st provincial elections. It's the first Iraqi political party to run a slate of black candidates. Fijil outlines the party's demands: recognition of blacks as an official minority, an apology for slavery, laws to combat racial discrimination. The party has found some non-black political allies.
There's been social-based oppression for a long time. We have a tribal-based society, and according to traditions and customs, the black man is considered to have low status.
Now, why would that be the case in a predominantly Muslim country? Where would they get this idea from that traditionally the black man has low status when this is not a teaching of Islam? So, you know, it is like the Quran speaks about that you will find amongst the Arabs that they obviously don't know the boundaries of Allah, because how could they still have this, be holding this idea when Islam clearly had done away with such teachings of racism? Yet, as you hear, this is something that they still have in their tradition. It's very sad.
Some white Iraqis say that founding a political party on racial lines is divisive, especially when Iraqis of different communities need to pull together. But Fijil, quoting Obama, says it's time for change.
There's a change in international politics. Obama won. And not that long ago, in his country, black people were marginalized. So this event has shattered all barriers.
Fijil says he hopes one day
معاناة كبيرة وصور كثيرة من صور اضطهاد الإنسان لأخيه الإنسان واستخدام واستعماله كما تستعمل الآلة الصماء، وكان لا يحق لهم امتلاك الأراضي بل يعملون عادة لدى الإقطاعيين. هؤلاء يشكلون نسبة كبيرة في المجتمع العراقي ويتواجد أغلبهم في البصرة جنوبي العراق.
كان الأسود وما يزال يعامل معاملة إقصاء وتهميش من الناحية الاجتماعية ومن الناحية السياسية. فكان الأسود وما يزال ينظر له نظرة العبد ونظرة الدونية التي أورثها موروثها من السابق ولغاية الآن. فينظر إلى الإنسان الأسود أنه أقل قيمة وأقل أهمية، وكأنه حملا متروكا لا أحد يعيره أي اهتمام. حتى السياسيين، حتى الكتاب، حتى الباحثين لم يعطوا الإنسان وقضايا الإنسان الأسود أي أهمية.
يعني أكو عبد أسود، ذاك احترام ماكو، تقدير ماكو، وترجع أكثر شيء على من؟ على العوائل الكبار نفسها. مثل الحين هالجهال يركض وراك أسود وما أدري شنو، هالسوالف هذه مو حلوة يعني هذه صراحة.
تسميات اللي عادة تطلق تجاهكم من البيض
دائما عبيد
بعد،
يعني أكثر الحكاية الماشية وأنا بالقرى السايق، كل ما شوية صار حكي بيني وبينهم، رأسا قال ها امشي أنت كلك عبد.
As you see in here, the word abid is slave. It's the regular, commonly used term to refer to black people, which means that in this day and time, they are still seeing us as just that, slaves. So that means the people in these countries have work to do. They have work to do. They're like they're like at the start of their civil rights movement, like we had in America. They need to start there. So they haven't even reached that point yet. They're still in the point where these things are going on, and they're trying to get themselves prepared to do something about it. So they got a lot of work to do. They're way behind. If we were to use the American civil rights movement as a marker, they are way behind that. They haven't even really begun to even, start to process. They're still in the first stages of planning of how they're going to do it. But as I said, this is shameful that's all they see us as just a slave. You know, you're a free person, but you're still looked upon as a slave. That means they see you as nothing. They see you as less than them, as a piece of property, if something of that sort. And as I said, Muslims, this needs to change. We need to address it, and no more turning the blind eye to it. No more.
يا اخي احنا كنا عبيد الله. لكن ماكو عنده غير كلمة عبد امشي انت من شنو. يعني مثل ابسط شيء امس انا بجراج بغداد، امس جيت من بغداد والسرق الي يقول لي هم اسود وهم خابص روحه. زين يا اسود وخابص روحه زي شلون بالله؟ قول لي ربكم ابيض انا ربي اسمر. يعني بد مصطلحات ما شلونها والله العظيم تعجب يعني. صدق لما نجح اوباما هم احنا طموحنا تمنينا قلنا هاي يعني نتمنى يعني يوم من الايام يصير عندنا رئيس او مو الا يعني رئيس دوله باي منصب يكون اسمر.
Garbage collectors in the capital Sana'a in green uniforms, distinguished by their dark skin. They are the untouchables of Yemen. They are known as the Akhdam, an Arabic name for servants. They prefer to be called the marginalized ones, a caste languishing at Yemen's lowest social order. This is where they live, in slums on the edge of the city. This is where 6 families live together in the complete absence of basic living conditions. There's a growing sense among these people that there's nothing they can do to change the pervasive culture of prejudice and discrimination. Ali Mahdi shows the dark and poorly furnished room where he lives with his wife and children. In the rainy seasons, it floods, and during the horrid heat, life becomes impossible.
My message to the world is please help us. We are all sick because of the filth and dirt and the severe poverty. This is not a decent life. We are Muslims like all Yemenis. We deserve a better life than this.
Nu'man is an activist. He has been fighting for years to improve the rights of his own people. Inspired by the American civil rights leader Martin Luther King, he is urging skeptics to show patience in the fight against stigma.
The only way to eliminate the stereotypes is to take action. The Akhdam have to understand that it is they who have to fight for their rights. We are Yemenis. The Constitution gives us the right to own a house and to go to school. However, rights are never granted. One must fight for them.
Mujahid is a local leader. He says government promises to build houses for the Akhdam were but empty words. He worries more about the future of the children.
You see? Now why? Why are these people in this condition? Why are they being treated like this? Why is there this not only tradition amongst the people, amongst the Arab people there, but including the government? It's institutionalized just like here in the West. And of course, with the teachings of Islam, as I keep repeating, it did away with these things. The Prophet was clear about this. The Quran is clear about this. These things were done away with, were supposed to have been done away with. But as you can see, in these places, it's just like here in the West. Christianity is talked about, and the loving of the brother and the neighbor and all these things, but the practice is something different. So here it seems that it's the same thing in the Arab countries. Islam is predominant, and the talk of the fairness and we're all together and it's the same religion, it's talk, but the practice is something different. And this is, like I said, a shame. And so, as I said, as a Muslim, I can't sit quiet about it anymore. We got to speak about it. We have to address it. And I'm calling on the Muslims to do something about it.
Mistreated at school, they drop out at an early age, only to find themselves confined to scavenging or clearing away human waste to earn a living. A thorny path for a caste on the fringes of Yemeni society.
So, as you saw, this issue is the issue of racism amongst those in the Arab places of the world. As you can see, this is not a small issue, because this mentality is hurting others. This mentality is causing the disenfranchisement of people. It is hurting them in their lives. It is hurting them in their livelihood. It is hurting them in their ability to be able to live and achieve all that they can achieve without any restrictions. And so again, I'm calling on the Muslims especially to deal with this issue, to not let it slip, to not brush it under the rug. We have to address it. We have to deal with it. We cannot allow this to go on any longer, especially not in this day and time. Especially not in this day and time. If we're going to be upset about Israeli racism against Palestinians, then we must also be upset that Palestinians have racist tendencies towards their fellow black Palestinians. If we're going to be upset about invasions and bombings in Muslim countries and things of this nature, then we need to be upset that there are people treating fellow Muslims just because of the color of their skin in this manner, in this way. This is unacceptable. We cannot accept this, and I for sure will not accept it. Okay? I praise Allah that, you know, He has teachings that are clear and concise against this. Therefore, we have an argument to make that we will not accept this. I will not sit by as a Muslim like I did with Christianity. I didn't accept it with Christianity and Christians, and I'm not going to sit by and accept it as a Muslim. This is the faith that, you know, I made a conscious decision to accept and practice. And so I refuse to sit by while people misuse the faith because of their ignorant cultural practices and traditional ideas about people and their color of skin. We cannot accept it, and as I repeat, I will not accept it. I will speak out just as harshly and as hard as I've spoken out against white racism. I will stand and speak out just as harshly against Arab racism and any other forms of racism.